You are listening to Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZWLP Conroe and 106.1 KZCCLP Conroe and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rick Schissler, your Silver Fox advisor and the host of the Weekly Business Hour. Well, thank you for taking time to join us today. We've got some really bad weather outside, and it's hard to get around. And in fact, one of our guests has been unable to get to the studio because of the bad weather. But we're going to, as they say, the show goes on, and we're going to have the show go on. Today, we've got a special show in a sense that we have some good topics to talk about, I think, for business owners or those who are thinking about going into business. I'm going to start out the show today. My thought for the week is entitled Nature. We also have, I think, a great guest in our expert corner, and that's Alan Stroud. He's an attorney with Beck Associates. He's also certified in estate planning and probate. And Alan's going to talk to us about how to pass your business down to the next generation. A lot of things you can do in advance that if you do them, it saves a lot of hassle and saves a lot of money. So he'll enlighten us on those. And I'll close out today's show with the Silver Fox tip of the week, listening to change. One of the key things when you have change going on, which is effectively every day, sometimes not as big as others, but when change is going on, one of the most effective things you can do is listen. So sit back and grab your pad and pencil and get ready to take notes as we talk about business here on the Weekly Business Hour. A reminder before we do get started that if you have a question or a comment about the show, or if you have a question about your own business, I'll be glad to take that as well. Just email it to me here at the station, Rick, R-I-C-K, at irlonestar.com. I appreciate those emails. I appreciate the comments on the show, and I really appreciate the opportunity to communicate with those of you who have business questions about your very own business. Well, let's start off as promised with our thought for the week, nature. I mean, what does nature mean in business, in a business sense, because we are a business show? Well, nature, the nature of things. You've heard that expression, I'm sure, at some point in your life. Well, it's just the nature of things. It's the way things work. It's kind of a term, and I don't want to be derogatory or negative, but it's not really a positive term when it's usually been used, at least in my experience. It's just the nature of things. It's the way it works. And you've got to accept it. And that's a difficult thing to do, and a thing that I encourage people not to accept the way things are being done. I think we need to always be challenging and looking for change. Now, don't misunderstand, that doesn't mean that everything's got to change to make it right. But you need to challenge it. Make sure that it's the right process, the right product, the right service. I mean, there's literally hundreds of thousands of questions that are just the way things have been done before in business, in a business like your business. Just overall, you need to be willing to challenge those and see if changing them would make a difference in your business. You know, another thing is that you challenge the nature of things because that is the way that you should be in business. Part of what I think being in business for yourself is all about is being willing to challenge. Now, when I say that, that's a willingness. It's got to be a characteristic, hopefully part of your personality. In many cases, it's thinking outside the box. I'm sure you've heard that expression. You've got to be willing to step outside of the box to challenge things. But I think it's got to be on your list of top 10 things to do to make your business more successful. And that is challenging nature, challenging the nature of things, and not letting nature take its course in every situation. Well, that's my thought for the week. And always remember, opportunities and success are right in front of you, ready for you to grab them. The Weekly Business Hour is where Montgomery County and businesses throughout the world come to talk about the latest in business news, ideas to improve your business, and to hear from some of the local business leaders on how they have found success right here in Montgomery County. A reminder for everybody out there listening, if you have not liked us on Facebook, I would encourage you to do so. It's the Weekly Business Hour. We have a page on Facebook. If you'll go to the Facebook, if you'll like it, And I also encourage you to set an alert so that each week when we post our show, typically by Wednesday, the show will be posted as a podcast. So if you miss part of it, or if you miss an entire show down the road, then you can receive an alert, go look at what we talked about. If something interests you, you can then listen to the show. Well, our business guest today was supposed to be Mike Mogul, the owner of Clean Sweep Office Cleaning. But as I mentioned, he's been detained by the weather. We're having lots and lots of rain here. So I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about some things that I feel are simple, direct, and important to your business. You know, one of the things Mike and I shared about the office cleaning business is that it is a very competitive business. There are lots and lots of people who clean offices. Typically, they're very small businesses with an owner, maybe one or two other people. So it's very competitive, very price competitive. I had an experience early in my career where I had to hire an office cleaning crew for a property that I was managing. And let me tell you, from my side of the table, from your side, if you hire these people, it's very difficult to find one that has quality that'll come in and do the job that you've contracted for. So on a day-to-day basis, being in a competitive industry, I have two thoughts for you. One is you need to be sure your execution every day is at its best, every single day. You cannot miss anything, because if you trip up just one time with one client, then let me tell you, there's 5 to 10 other people waiting, just like in the office cleaning business, waiting to take your business. And the second thing is that you need to invest a lot of time, extra time, if you understand what I'm saying, extra time in hiring people. We need the best people in our businesses. We know that, or you should know that, and it takes time. And many times as business owners, especially in small businesses, we just don't have that time. But you've got to take that time, particularly when you're in a service business and your personnel will be going on the client's site. Office cleaning is a difficult one because you typically go on at night. And you know what that leads to? A door's left unlocked, the alarm's not set, something's missing. Well, it was the office cleaning crew. And that makes it twice as difficult. But the fact is that you need to hire and train. It needs to be right in your top 3 that you do every day. So my comments on that in a competitive industry is be sure your execution is dead on every single day. And the second thing is hire the best people you can and train them and retrain them. Because if you don't, you're going to have that constant turmoil and turnover, and you'll eventually figure out that you're not making any money because turnover costs you more than you can ever imagine. The other thing that I think is interesting in a small business is being our boss. And when we're our own boss, a lot of advantages. But you know, we've had a lot of guests on this show. Over 200 entrepreneurs have been our guests on the show over the past 4 years. And many of them like being the boss. That's why they started their business. They wanted to be their own boss. But there are also a lot of challenges, as you know. You go home at night and the business stays with you. Yes, you may be able to put it aside, but the reality is 24/7, you own a business. In a sense, it owns you. And there are many, many things, too many for me to get into today, that as the owner of the business that you've got to be willing to leave behind at the office. So my encouragement is be sure you take some time away. Be sure you're able to escape, if that's the right word, that 24/7 situation, so you can at least step back, relax, and enjoy life. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the end of our first segment, and I hope you'll stay with us. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit more about business, competitive businesses, and those that offer some kind of marketing, uniqueness of that marketing. So please stay with us, and we'll be right back with you.
Lone Star Community Radio is looking for those who are interested in hosting their own talk show, with monthly and weekly slots available on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, and on irlonestar.com. Start your own podcast, create your first YouTube channel, and be on TV. Contact Lone Star Community Radio online at irlonestar.com or call the station message line at 936-647-3776.
This is Rick Schissler, your Silver Fox advisor and host of the Weekly Business Hour. Welcome you back to this segment of the Weekly Business Hour. We're going to talk a little bit more in this part of the show about being in business for yourself. And one of the things I'd like to zero in on is setting your business apart from other businesses. You know, that's something that I try to ask almost every business owner that comes on this show, because I have found finding that unique sales proposition, it's got many, many names. What makes your business different? If I go to the old Yellow Pages or I Google, obviously something pops up, who's got the biggest ad and whatnot. But generally speaking, day in and day out, you have to have a business. You have to be showing something, telling a story that sets your business apart from the similar business just down the street. And that is a difficult concept, I think, for a lot of small business people to grab onto. But I believe that it's one of the most important things, and hopefully it's a question you answered when you sat down and put your plan together before you even opened the front doors. But let me assure you, even if you've been in business 10, 20 years or more, it's not too late. But you really need to sit down and figure out what makes your business. Why does someone want to do business with you and not your competitor? That is one of the best edges you can have in business. It is one of the most competitive tools, one of the best tools I've ever experienced, because again, I believe a lot of small businesses have trouble defining that. Now, let me give you an example. Like Mike Mogul, he owns a office cleaning services. And then there's 3 others, say, in the area. What makes Mike's business stand out over the others? Now, it could be price, always that price competition there. I'll shave $1 off my price. Doubtless that's out there. And that is one of the directions you can take. My business is different because it's cheaper. Now, I believe in the long run, that's not going to maximize your effort in the business and return to you a reasonable return based on your investment of human capital and dollars and your own blood, sweat, and tears, so to speak. But that is a way to distinguish and set your business apart from other businesses. But there are other things you can do, like we're on time every night to clean your office. We clean your office 5 times a week, and once a month it's free. Now, again, that's a competitive thing. It's a price thing, but it's got a little bit of a story to it. And that's one of the things I think you have to do when you deal with a unique selling proposition or setting your business aside, is develop a story around it. Something that can be repeated. In other words, you can repeat this when you talk to potential clients and customers. You can put it into your advertising, your print material. If you have other kinds of media, such as radio, if you have a radio ad, tell that story of why your business is different than other businesses, because that's what will attract people to try your business. Now, some of this, don't misunderstand, takes some research. It's not just your gut that tells you what's different. You need to see what the competition is doing. And it's not that difficult. Look at their advertising. Look at what they are trying to sell. Look at their service company. Look at their vehicles. Look at the people that work for them. How do they look? Are they wearing uniforms? They clean? The truck's clean? They're selling a product. Look what products they're selling. Typically, there's more than one manufacturer that provides a product, and you have a choice. More than one distributor. Are they selling the best products? Are they selling products really that are geared for this, that? Learn what your competitors are doing and realize that you have to do something different. The second part of that question of determining what the customers are looking for is to do some research and find out what the customers really are looking for. And that is a little more challenging. You have to do some talking to people. You've got to do some soul searching. It all starts typically, I have found, when people start businesses right there in their own home and their own experiences in business. They know, hey, here's an idea. I believe that there could be an improvement. There could be an option for a business if we do X, Y, Z. So it's a challenging proposition, but it is one that I feel is so important if you plan to get the most out of your business, if you plan to be the most successful, if your ROI, return on investment, and you want it to be the highest, your profit, your sales, you want them to be at or above industry standards, then you really have to discover who you are, or who the customer, the client that you're trying to sell to, who they are looking for. And you must sell that each and every day. Don't slip. I've seen businesses that put the bar up too high, and they hold themselves out to doing this certain things, or there's certain ways, and then the next thing you know, the guy shows up without his uniform, or you're late for a service, or your products are subpar and there's lots of returns. You've fallen off your horse and you've defeated, and in my opinion, eventually you can destroy. And I've experienced that, and you probably have too, in doing business with certain businesses over the years. So set up your unique selling proposition and follow through on it. I think it's a critical thing to do. The second thing is, there's a question that I ask a lot of guests, and it is, if you had to do it all over again, would you do it? And then if you would, what would you change? You know, that's a question that's kind of a fun question. It's a question that sometimes I ask my clients, particularly when we first start out, because it's a way to kind of turn, if you will, have them look in the mirror and say, okay, I've done this, I'm doing this, I see a future in this way, but what would you change if you could start again? Or would you do this again? It's very important to understand that, because even again, if you're in a business 5, 10, 20 years, and the fact that you answer that question and say, no, I wouldn't do it again, that tells me you're perhaps in the wrong place. Maybe it's time to put the business in a position to sell it. And that's at one end of the scale. But the other end of the scale is, yes, I would do it, and these are the things I would do different. And it's never too late, in my opinion, to look at those things. I mean, experience, obviously, is how we learn. So it's very important that we look at what we could do different to make the business better. And by better, I mean just for you, the owner, to be more comfortable. Again, more revenue, more profit, more return on investment, all the accounting facts and figures, very important. But you, as the owner, must be comfortable in what you're doing, the product you're delivering, the service you're providing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're to our next break. We're going to take a short break now, and we'll be back, and we'll have a little more conversation about what makes your business what it is today. Thanks.
Don't miss Lone Star Community Radio on TV and YouTube. Our talk show and music shows are featured on Our City TV, Suddenlink Channel 12, and have their own YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to keep up with posted shows and comment on them below the video.
You are listening to the Weekly Business Hour, and this is Rick Schissler, your Silver Fox advisor and host of the Weekly Business Hour. Well, today we've been talking a little bit about some key factors in business, kind of a conversation that I've put together based on some emails I've received from those who listen to the show, and also some issues that my clients typically bring up when we visit about their business. Next thing I'd like to touch on is maintaining a personal discipline. You know, I have seen people as they own a business for a period of time, it could be a year, 2, 5, whatever, that their personal discipline that they exhibit when they start the business, in other words, when everything's on the line, get up early, work late, all those basic things you have to do to really, in my opinion, to make a business get to the point where it operates in a way that you can pull back a little bit. And that's where the shift takes place that I believe some business owners are not aware of. They back out too far. I was dealing with a business some years ago, and it was a great business. 3 years in, they were doing very well. They had some built-in clients, had lots of revenue coming in. They were making a profit. And then all of a sudden they started saying, well, we've got all this money. Let's go do something else. Let's take a trip. Let's take time away from the business. And the problem with their business was that it was a service business, typically 5 days a week. So they got Saturday and Sunday off, except for office work. It was a husband and wife. Wife took care of the inside of the business. Husband had 6, 8 people working in the business. He managed those people, went out and sold, and then managed the delivery of a service. But they pulled out too quick. They pulled back from the business. They lost their discipline. And within another year or so, they lost their business. It's the most amazing thing that I've ever witnessed, how quick that it can happen, that if you don't pay attention, and when you start to back away, you have to have certain parameters, in my opinion, preferably written down on what's going to happen, who's going to do what in your place, who's going to be keeping an eye on things. And that's a really broad generalization. But it's very important that you put a plan together. Now, I'm not talking about the occasional day off, long weekend, vacation, whatever. I'm talking about where you start slipping away, moving back, so you're only in the office 3 or 4 days a week, maybe. You've got to be careful, and you've got to plan that out, and you've got to kind of move into it. In my opinion, you move or shift into it. It's not an overnight thing, because your employees are going to be watching what's happening, and when they see you back away, then I guarantee you human nature will cause them to slow down as well and lose some of their discipline. So it's important that you communicate with them and that you've selected, again, 1 or 2 people or more to continue to supervise, manage the business, and have a key person, perhaps the person you've identified that might replace you one day, that keeps an eye on the business and reports to you, and that you have a set of metrics that you can watch, preferably on a weekly basis, maybe even on a daily basis, to make sure things from that point of view are operating while you're away doing something else. Again, very important to plan this situation. Every business gets there, but I've seen that transition from that first year, 2, 3 years, where you really have to bust it to get it all to fall into place. And you hit that 3rd or 4th year, things are running well, and people are really tired, a little bit worn out, and they just start pulling back. And they're not gone once a month, they're gone twice a month. And it just somehow builds. And then one day they look up and their business has slipped away. Sometimes they can't even pull it back, and they lose it. It happens. Don't let it happen to you. Another thing I'd like to touch on before we go to our bottom of the hour break, and it's to me, it's an interesting point that people, when they look at their business, really spend enough time looking at, where is my business going? What is the future? That's a question I ask a lot of guests, our entrepreneur guests, is what is the future? What do you see in the future? Sometimes they talk about the industry they're in, because certain industries have a changing future, new rules, new laws, new competitors. There's major shifts going on within the industry, and they're aware of it. And of course, the follow-up question is, how are you going to meet those changes? What's your plan? Sometimes people have an answer. Sometimes they just have that look, that look like deer in the headlights, and they're not really sure. And that's something else, I think, as a business, that you have to take a little time. I know there's not much of it, and you have to look at what the future is in your business. And I'm not just talking about putting an annual business plan together or a 3-year business plan together or whatever. Think about your business and how it's positioned with the strengths and the weaknesses, all the things you should look at when you do a formal plan each year for your business. But analyze those out 3 years, 5 years. And then plug in, when is it that you want to sell the business or to move on and have someone else manage the business or pass the business on to family, whatever your situation is. And we've talked a lot about that particular situation on this show. But when you look out to the future, realize a couple things. One is your industry will change at some point. Some industries change very quickly. Some industries change all the time. Some don't appear to change at all, but they are changing. And the person who's going to be successful and the person who's going to be standing, if you will, when all the dust settles, is the one who understands that the change has taken place and they prepare for the change. And a lot of times those preparations and implementation of those issues takes time, a period of time, maybe a period of years. So don't shortchange yourself. Always look forward in your business and look at what's coming down the road, because typically there's lots of opportunity there. Lots of opportunity that's there for the person who will reach out and grab it. Well, I appreciate you listening today as I've tried to fill in for our guest and offer some key points and things I've learned on this show and from the emails I've received. We're going to take our bottom of the hour break, and then we're going to come back. And in our expert corner today, I'm pleased to say that Alan Stroud will be joining us to talk about how to pass your business on generationally. So stay with us. We'll be right back with you.
Don't forget to download the Lone Star Community Radio app from your Google Play or Apple Store. Bring Montgomery County's community radio with you anywhere with your smartphone or tablet. If you are in the Conroe area, tune in on FM. That's Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1. If you are on the computer, bookmark irlonestar.com as your internet radio station. A Lone Star Community Radio, Broadcasting 24/7 from the heart of downtown Conroe, Texas.
This is Rick Schissler, your Silver Fox advisor and the host of the Weekly Business Hour. Welcome back to our bottom of the hour segment, where we're going to have an opportunity to talk to Mr. Alan Stroud, a board-certified attorney in estate and probate. And Alan, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you, Rick. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, I think you've got a wonderful topic today, talking about how to pass your business on effectively to the next generation. It's fraught with potholes and places that an individual can really make mistakes and really gum up the works, plus, most importantly, cost them a lot of money if they don't do it right.
That's exactly right.
Well, why don't we start out and talk about the event of disability, because that's something that could happen at any time to anybody who owns a business.
And frankly, this is probably the part of planning that most people miss. They think, okay, well, I've got covered what happens to me at death, but a lot of times they don't think about, what if I'm incapacitated and unable to serve? They often may have powers of attorney and that kind of thing in place, but keep in mind, that doesn't help you in your fiduciary capacity as, say, a president or a director of a company. If the president of IBM can't work one day because he's incapacitated, his wife is not going to come in and take over. And that's what most people have in place, is that personal type of power of attorney. So the company needs something in place that would allow that key person or that owner to grant those powers to someone else to operate the business on a daily basis, to be able to deal with the checking account, make payroll, all those kinds of things that they may deal with on a day-to-day basis, but now they can't. And most companies don't really have anything in place where someone else can step in and make a lot of those decisions.
Well, I can't imagine what a catastrophic event that would be for an average small business, for the owner to be incapacitated and potentially, like you alluded to, no one can sign checks, no one can make payroll.
That's right.
Gosh, that's just got to be devastating.
That's right.
Do you have any?
It really is, and that's why they've got to have something with the bank. Yeah. We often either have some kind of minutes or a emergency plan, so to speak, that's in place that the directors have approved that would kick in the event of disability. And then we often define what that disability is so that we don't have someone, sneaking in to take control when it's really not that catastrophic. But we have a plan in place that's passed while the owner is in good mental condition, and he just hangs on to that. It's one of those in your back pocket sort of deals, part of the corporate records. And when that day comes, the key people know where that plan is, and they can take it to the bank, and that would allow them to write checks or to the payroll folks or whatever the issue is that they're trying to get done. We've got those powers in place that kick in upon disability. That's usually the easiest way to do that.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me, and anyone that listens to this segment of our show, I really encourage you, what Mr. Stroud has suggested, that you make sure that you have some kind of emergency business plan in case of your own disability. The event of death, like you mentioned when we first started the conversation today, is the one that everybody thinks about, but there's a lot of different things that need to be thought about in a business of what happens if the business owner actually dies.
There really is, and like I said, that's probably the one that more people think about, but a lot of people still don't have anything done about that, so that when they die, what often happens is, if there's no plan in place, with probate, there's a waiting period, and an executor is not going to get appointed immediately. Now, maybe you can go down and file a temporary administration, but all of a sudden now the cost of your probate is going to be a lot more just to deal with your business, because you're going to have short-term needs that you need somebody to be able to have access or power to do those things immediately upon your death. So having a plan in place will allow the company to run seamlessly even at your death, and we're not waiting that 6 to 8 weeks for the court process to get your executor letters testamentary before they can have any authority to vote the stock and, appoint new people, appoint new officers. past minutes that allow certain things to happen. If you've got that immediately covered, then again, we don't have that delay of probate. Another issue that a lot of people don't think about, and we see it a lot with our business owner clients, often the business is by far the largest asset of the estate. And rare is the client that has all their kids in the business. Usually it's one, if any. And so the difficulty becomes, how do we divide up the estate so that it's fair to the kids, but also fair to the one or ones that are inheriting the business? Nothing is worse than being the only child in the business, and say there's 4 siblings. You've only got a fourth of the business, yet you're the one running it. So the other 3 can outvote you. And it can be a real nightmare and really tie your hands while you're trying to run that business. So we like to put in place an estate plan that allows for fairness, so to speak, of the kids that are in the business versus the kids that aren't in the business. And if there's other assets, we can give the business to the kids that are in the business and the other assets to the kids that are not in the business. The problem is, usually those 2 numbers are not equal.
Well, and you create that situation, that's an interesting scenario, because the thing that pops in my head when I listen to what you were saying is, and I'll use your example, 1 in, 3 out, 4 kids total. Do the other 3 even have a concept of what the business is worth? I mean, that valuation,
probably not.
That's got to be a big challenge.
It is. We often will get a professional appraiser involved for an appraiser just to give the kids the idea, because often they have no clue. You're right. And we may be sitting on a very, very valuable asset. Sometimes we'll even do that while the client's alive, because one of the strategies we use is we also get a life insurance expert involved, especially for the clients who their business is the primary asset of the estate and they don't have other assets to give those kids that are not in the business. So often what we'll recommend is, well, let's give the business to the kids that are in, and let's buy offsetting value of life insurance to give to the others. Well, you got to know what the business is worth before you can calculate how much insurance you need. So that's one strategy that we use to help folks who've got kids in the business and out of the business. Sometimes you just can't either get enough insurance, it's too expensive, or sometimes the client is uninsurable. And so we can't go down that road with the insurance. In that case, if we're left with the only option of, hey, we've got this business and we've got to somehow divide it, what we'll do in that case is give the child or children who are in the business voting stock. And we give the kids that are not in the business non-voting stock. And what that allows to happen is the kids that are running it have the voice, and they've got the vote. And they can run the business without being hampered by the kids who are not in the business and maybe don't have any idea what's going on, but all of a sudden, once somebody gets power, they might start trying to exercise that right, even though they really don't know what they're doing. Most companies do not already have a voting, non-voting equity structure. So that's something we often do while the client is still alive, is do a reorganization of the corporate equity into maybe 1% voting, 99% non-voting. And we can do a lot of things with that. Not only does it allow us to do this transfer at death with voting versus non-voting, but it also allows us to make gifts during life. Some clients who might be worried about estate taxes might want to start making gifts of non-voting stock to trust for kids. It's a perfect asset that mom or dad can still keep control of the vote, but they're getting some of that value out of their estate, usually at a discounted rate, because a minority non-voting interest is going to be subject to some estate valuation discounting. So it's a tool that we can use to really accomplish a lot of things, and it can solve a lot of those problems.
Well, it sounds like the key is that you need to do this now instead of later. It sounds like it's a very, very important part of being in my mind, responsible corporate responsibility to make sure the business is set up in a manner that it will and can continue smoothly after you pass away.
I would totally agree, because if you don't deal with it now, it's going to be impossible during the probate for the kids that are in the business to convince the other kids that are not in the business to give up their voting control.
Yeah, sounds
and
like
so
a bad
if mom
situation.
And dad have already that's right. If mom and dad have already done that during life, then it helps the children preserve their relationships. They don't see each other as the bad guy. They say, hey, this was mom and dad's wishes. Maybe they don't like it. Maybe they're not happy with it. But they understand, hey, this is what mom and dad wanted. And it's a lot easier for kids to accept that than it is a heavy-handed executor trying to push this down the throats of the kids who aren't in the business, because they see it simply as, hey, somebody's taking a grab at power.
Well, Alan, I deeply appreciate you coming on today and sharing some of those things. And I suspect there are a lot of people that have some questions. And if they wanted to contact you to talk about this further, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, one of two ways. They can either give our office a call, and that number is 281-440-4777, or they can shoot me an email at, I'll give you the easy one, info, I-N-F-O, at jrbecklaw.com.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our final break for the day. And when we come back, I'm going to give you what I call my Silver Fox tip of the week, which is listening to change. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A Lone Star Community Radio is ready for the summer. If you or anyone you know is looking for summer internship opportunities, a Lone Star Community Radio is a great place to grab the mic and be on the air. A Lone Star Community Radio offers a great opportunity to those interested in learning about the radio world all year round. Be an on-air personality, talk show producer, or YouTube, TV, podcast editor. Contact the station at info@irlonestar.com or call the station's message line at 936-647-3776.
This is the Weekly Business Hour, and this is Rick Schissler, your Silver Fox advisor and host of the Weekly Business Hour. First, I want to thank you for listening to today's show. Appreciate it. We always close out our show with what I call the Silver Fox tip of the week. But before I get there, I want to make sure that those who are listening who are in the Conroe, Montgomery County area realize they can sponsor the show. If you have an interest in sponsoring the show, again, just email me at rick@irlonestar.com. Well, let's talk about listening to change. That's my blog for this week. It's been published. I put out a little teaser last week, and the full blog will be published later today. But listening to change, now that may sound a little unusual to those who are listening, but listening to change. One of the most important things we can do is listen. I mean, it's obvious that, as I say in the blog, people are a key ingredient to successful change. To me, that's just a given. That's a fact. Because if we're going to make a change in our business, we want to stay up with what's going on. We want to move a different direction, want to take on new products, new service, whatever the change is. It's important that the people who work for us are on board with that change and help us make it to be a successful change. Obviously, people are our most important asset. Unfortunately, I've seen too many businesses that lose track of that. I've also seen it on the other end of the scale. This is a subject that really gets talked about, pushed around, thought, a lot of work out there done about leadership and leading people, building people up, a lot of good things happening. But the key thing that I always try to remember, they are our most important asset, and we need to treat it like it is our most important asset. Don't forget when you're doing this, and you've heard this from my mouth before, don't forget the people who serve your business, okay? The people like your vendors, the professionals such as lawyers and accountants. They are part of the people that you need to have on your team. If you have a mentor, an advisor, they need to be part of the change and understand it. And of course, most importantly, your customer and clients need to be part of your change. And we need to, as business owners, be listening to what they have to say. I mean, I didn't talk about what caused you or instituted the need to make a change, but a lot of times we make change because we do listen to one or more groups of these people, including our employees. And it really is important that we test the water, so to speak, to make sure that everybody out there potentially will be in a positive frame of mind and will accept this change and really will help promote the change, whatever it might be. So it's important that we listen to the key people that are part of our business. The next step is you have to be effective in your communication. You know, I find many business owners, their business reflects their personality, good or bad. We all have good points and we all have some bad points. But it's important, regardless, that we learn how to effectively communicate with our people. Effective communication leads to what I call valuable change. You've got to listen to people, first and foremost, in my opinion, before you can effectively communicate, before you can say something in turn to them. You have to listen. Yes, you can start the conversation, but listening is an integral part of good, solid, effective communication. And remember, the third point is listening can be verbal and it can be nonverbal. A lot of us focus on the verbal part. This is what I heard, this is what I said. But the nonverbal part, particularly with employees, can be the most important thing to them. Your body language, for an example, or what they think you were thinking, what was unsaid. This gets back to the culture of your business and really gets back to how effective you've been communicating with people since they came on board. It's that nonverbal communication that we have to also be aware of, and we need to be listening to get a feel for what people are interpreting our nonverbal communication. So don't forget about that. Fourth point I want to make is an effective listener is most persuasive when you've listened well. The point being is you listen well, you hear what's said, you digest it, and you put it into that change that we're talking about, and you will be most effective in doing that. The idea of change has a lot of other elements that go with it in listening for change, and I want to touch on a couple real quick. One is effective listening is what you're looking for when you go about everything you do every day, in my opinion. You know, we always read or hear the stories about the guy that walks and says hello to everybody. He knows everybody that works for him. He knows their backgrounds. He knows their family. That's wonderful. Because to me, that sets it up to effectively listen to your employees. But again, don't forget the other people that affect your change, being your vendors, your clients and customers, your professionals. All these people affect how successful your change is going to be and how successful ultimately your business is going to be. So it's real important that we listen to them as well, and that we're effective in our listening with these people on a daily basis. This is not something you turn on and turn off. In other words, I'm going to be an effective listener. I'm going to have a meeting with so-and-so, or I'm going to speak to the employees and I want to really listen to what they have to say. I think being an effective listener is something, it's a skill that you practice every day. And everyone, including the person who answers the phone, you listen to what they're saying. Even if it's not directly to you, you develop a sense of what they're saying, who they are, and how they will perceive and accept, and most importantly, implement a change that you might develop in the business. One of the other things that I think is missed in communication, and again, this is a topic that we could spend days talking about, but is training your staff. You know, if you hire someone and you put them to work and you give them a general direction of what to do, then what they're going to do is either figure it out on their own, or they're going to watch other people or talk to other people, and then they're going to figure it out on their own. And typically that's not going to be the best way. Needless to say, a new person sometimes has a perception of how a job should be done that might be beneficial. And again, we're back to effectively listening to them. But you need to train people that come on board, and training is not just for new employees. One of the major downfalls of every business, small business particularly, is we feel like we just don't have enough time. And one of the things I have seen over and over that gets impacted in a negative way by us feeling that we don't have enough time is training, is improving our employees' knowledge and abilities to perform their job. Training is an ongoing thing. And when you stop and take a look at successful businesses, pick up a book, an article about a successful business, and you will likely find something in there about people, how they were trained, how they respond. I've got the best people. Well, part of that equation is that I trained them to be some of the best people. I got good raw talent when I hired them with some experience, but I have trained them and I've helped mold them in, and they have become part of our business, our culture, and therefore they're highly effective in what they do. So it's important. Communication. If you're going to affect change in your business, then you need to listen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you joining us this week. I hope you've enjoyed the show. And please put a note on your calendar to join us again next Monday right here on irlonestar.com at 11 a.m. Remember, you too can sponsor the Weekly Business Hour. And again, contact me, Rick, at irlonestar.com for details. Look for the podcast of today's show of the Weekly Business Hour on irlonestar.com and Facebook and YouTube later in the week. Thank you again for joining us. Remember to stay in touch with what's happening in Montgomery County right here on Lone Star Community Radio.
Thanks for checking out this podcast of Lone Star Community Radio, Montgomery County's community radio station. If you enjoyed this recording, make sure to check out our past shows online at irlonestar.com or their respective video or podcast formats on YouTube, Google Play, or iTunes. If you have any questions regarding the show, either it being about sponsorships or questions for the host, contact the station manager at dick@irlonestar.com or call the station at 936-647-3776. This show was recorded in downtown Conroe, Texas at the Lone Star Community Radio Studios, and Lone Star Community Radio reserves all rights to this recording and images.